Okay, so yesterday we talked a little bit about the background to the Odyssey, the type of work that it is, a little bit about the authorship. What does anyone remember about that?
Homer didn't write this.
He didn't? Okay, what did he do?
Memorized it.
Yeah, so Homer is what we call the author. It's a traditional name. We don't really know anything about him. Yes. Memorized. He composed it, usually is the verb that we use, because he did create this.
It's an epic.
It's an epic. All right. What does that mean? What do you know about epics?
There's like heroes.
Heroes.
I forgot what else we said.
What else? Are you taking any notes?
Wars.
You can use your notes.
Wars.
Wars, often, yes. What else? Gods. Remember anything else about Homer or about epics? What was that?
It was more into 2000.
Yeah. Okay, a long time ago.
Oh, that's what it is. That's it.
That's it?
I mean, it's not it might not be it, but it's like.
Okay, then what about, let's get a couple more things about each of these. What else is Homer known for?
The Iliad.
The Iliad, yes. That's the other.
And you don't really know much about him.
Quite Homer, right, we don't know a whole lot about him.
You grew up in the Greek Dark Ages?
The Greek Dark Ages, yes. We just don't know a whole lot about that period in general. Why?
Because before Christ.
We know lots about the Egyptian world before Christ.
Because
Babylonian world.
Yeah, writing system.
Right, they didn't have a writing system at this time. They had one before, it was kind of an awkward one, and then they lost it, and they didn't get a new one until sometime after. So we don't have any real records from this time. But it was also a time where they were fairly poor, so they didn't produce a whole lot that would be left for us to see, buildings and things and artifacts. Okay, yes. According to tradition, Homer was blind. There's this connection in Greek thought between blindness and having special connection with the gods. So there's this other character in Greek myth, Tiresias, who's he can see the future, and he's blind also. Usually portrayed that way, not always, but blindness and the gods is the sort of connection there, this inner sight. Okay, what else about epics? So we've got heroes, we've got wars, we've got gods. Can you tell me anything about the way that an epic is written?
Oh,
Isn't it a
is it
poem?
a poem?
It's a really long poem.
It's like 6 something. There's something.
Yep. Yeah, there's this meter, this rhythm that it follows called dactylic hexameter, which is this particular rhythm that the lines have. Now, this English translation doesn't have the same rhythm there, but the original Greek does. The length is definitely part of what makes an epic an epic. And it's based on this world of myth. And Homer is assuming that his audience is familiar with this. So he's going to talk a lot about different Greek gods and refer to different events in Greek mythology that some of us might not always be familiar with. So it's important that we get further into it. All right, and we said yesterday in Greek myth, which is what? The Trojan War. Okay, the most important storyline in Greek mythology. I mean, there are plenty of myths. Not all of them are really connected to each other in terms of plot, in terms of characters. But the Trojan War was this whole giant system of myths and stories, partially based in reality. There was, in fact, a Trojan War. The city of Troy has been found. It was, in fact, destroyed multiple times over its history before it was eventually abandoned. One of the times it was destroyed is at roughly the right time for it to have been the Trojan War that the Greeks are talking about in their myths. Some of the people, some of the characters in the Trojan, in these myths, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, we have some documents from the people who lived in that area, the Hittites, which seem to suggest that some of these people were real people. Specifically, the two whose names are mentioned are Agamemnon, who's the leader of the Greek army, and then Paris or Alexander, who's one of the princes of Troy. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what we know about the Trojan War and that whole storyline, and then we're actually going to read a sort of summarized version of the Trojan War and some of the events surrounding it. So what does anyone know about the Trojan War? Well, who are the two sides in the Trojan War? The Greeks and the Trojans. Greeks versus Trojans. All right. Who wins? The Greeks, yeah. As I said, Troy was destroyed multiple times. The Greeks win, and we've got gods on different sides. The gods sort of all pick sides in this, and they interfere in various ways. Anyone know where Troy is geographically? Okay, so we got to get a little, let's see how well I can draw a map of the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean here. Actually, I don't have to. Take out your books. There are maps in the front.
That's what it's like? That's what it was?
Yes, in the Mediterranean. So if you take a look, I'll tell you which page to go to. We're here in the book on page, so not all of the map pages are not numbered. So it's actually page 72 and 73. So this one. This one. Okay, so it's the last of the maps in there. Now, so we've got, this is in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. So if you follow the coastline down here in the southeast corner there, you see where it's sort of straight up and down says Phoenicians. You go straight down that way, you get to modern day, that's modern day Syria, Israel, or in that area at the very eastern end of the Mediterranean. So you keep going down, it starts to curve around, and then you get to Egypt at the bottom, and you go around to northern Africa if you keep going that direction. If you follow the other way, so starting where it says Phoenicians, you go up along the coast, then it turns west. This big landmass up here, this is modern day Turkey. And you see where Troy is. If you keep going up, you see there's all these islands there in the Aegean Sea, this body of water to the west of Turkey, all these islands here. Troy is there, and this here is Greece, sticking down out of mainland Europe into the Mediterranean. If you go from Greece and you go west, you get to Italy. You keep going west. From there, you'll get to France and then Spain, and then eventually the ocean. So this is where it took place. Now, if you look at the scale there, you notice this is actually not a very large area. The distance between most of the parts of Greece and Troy is only about 200 miles or so. But remember, this is a world without electricity, without combustion engines. How would people travel around at this time? They would walk. How else?
Water.
Travel by water. How are you going to travel on the water? In a boat. How's your boat going to travel? You might row it, or the other option is sails. Usually a combination of those two. So even a large boat that you're building by hand out of timber is just not going to be that large. Even if it's 80, 90, 100 feet long, you're not talking a very large boat. And even though the Mediterranean is calmer than the ocean in general, it's still dangerous traveling around. They also don't have reliable methods of predicting weather. Storms could rise suddenly. Your ship would sink, and you'd drown, and nobody would ever know what happened to you. How could they? So usually when you're traveling, you try to stay fairly close to the coast. But that western area there, this here is Greece. From a historical perspective, in the Black Sea up here, that the Trojans were trying to control that, charge people money to sail through there or something like that. And so the Greeks went to war with them. But that's not how it's portrayed here in Greek mythology. Right, any questions about that map? I wish they had a more zoomed out map, and I should have brought one. But I can show you guys one a little bit later. Any questions? Okay. What I want to do now is I want to read a little bit from this book by Edith Hamilton. It's a adapted version of a lot of Greek myths. I want to read a little bit from here about the Trojan War. So guys who are watching from home, I'll send this to you and you can read it at home.